So far in Ephesians 5, Paul has talked about a lot of, I guess, what you would call relationships in the church, relationships outside of the church. But quite frankly, in comparison to our passage today, most of these relationships are very generic. Today he's going to get very specific. He begins to talk about marriage. God has a lot to say about marriage, by the way. And here's some of the key verses. In Ephesians 5:22, it says, "Wives, submit to your own husbands as unto the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church. His body is himself as its Savior. Now as the church submits to Christ, so wives should submit to their husbands in everything." Then he says, "Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church." No, in our nation today, in the church and outside the church, the divorce rate is the same. The divorce rate inside the church is 51%. The divorce rate outside the church is 51%. You know, that is called disunity, that we can't seem to get along anymore. And Satan loves disunity. He loves broken relationships. And one of Satan's key targets is marriage. Two things today that I want you to see. First of all, wives have been called to submit or be subject to their husbands. Why? Because God said so. You know, he did not give this command thinking that the wife would enjoy this command. He gave this command because, quite frankly, it's the only way that it's going to work, that the wife is to be subject to her husband. And most wives would say, "Well, you don't know my husband." Well, he did. And he asked you to submit anyway, to be subject anyway, to serve anyway. And then he says to the husbands, and I think this is more important, "Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church." Husbands are to love their church like Christ loved them. Christ gave himself up for you. Christ sacrificed himself for you. Christ died for you. Husbands, that's what he's calling you to do with your wives, that you give yourself up for her, that you will really, literally die a death for her. Here's the truth. There are very few wives out there that wouldn't submit to a husband that loved her that deeply. So here you go. Husbands, love your wives like Christ. Don't love your wives like your father loved your mama. Don't love your wife like other husbands love their wives. Love your wife like Christ loves you. And wives, be subject to him. Submit to him. Why? Because God said so.